Hello and welcome to Learning Rewired, the podcast brought to you by Headspring, the joint venture between the Financial Times and IE Business School, bringing insights on leadership development, corporate culture, and talent strategy. I'm your host, Thiago Kivi, and today, for the first time ever, I actually have a co-host, Aisha Zerouki, our Business Development and Corporate Partnerships Director at Headspring. And I hear she's a big fan of our guests today. Aisha, welcome.
Thank you, Thiago, for having me.
Great.
Isabel.
It's great to have you. And as you've heard Aisha mentioning, our guest today, Isabel Berwick, is a Financial Times journalist and author of The Future-Proof Career, a book that came out last year. And she also is the writer of the Work in It column of the Financial Times and the newsletter that goes out to probably thousands of people every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
Yeah. So Isabel, you work here at the Financial Times. You're very familiar with the studio, but it's great to have you here at the Learning Rewired podcast.
Thank you, Thiago, and thank you, Aisha. Yeah, it's great to be back. I really miss doing my podcast. I did 150 episodes of Working It, but I really miss it. So it's lovely to be here.
Excellent. No, and of course, in the last couple of years, you managed to really build a name for yourself in this space, right? Corporate culture and so on. And of course, I guess your book came as a consequence of all the work that you've done. I wanted to jump into the book, and please, Aisha, also jump in straight away as well. The title of the book, because since I saw the book coming out, I read the title, and I was actually very surprised by the title, because you, as a journalist, you tend to, I imagine you see hundreds and thousands of books like that every day. And journalists by nature, they're quite skeptical of big, bold claims like that, right? Future-proofing your career and so on. So I wanted to kind of dive a little bit into this point. We're in 2025 now. The world is changing at a pace that we really can't even keep up. Can anybody truly future-proof their careers, and how, in your perspective?
So the paperback of my book's just come out. I updated it with some more stuff about AI, some stuff about Trump and anti-DEI measures. So yeah, the world's changed a lot even since I wrote it in 2024. But can you truly future-proof your career? No, because we're living in a world of uncertainty. But I think there are common threads that I see every day in my work, and also I talk about them in my book around, being curious, learning new skills, all the kind of stuff you talk about here. Mm-hmm. I think the people who will thrive in the future of work will be those who are adaptable and flexible. And actually, that's not cohort dependent. So people often talk about Gen Z coming in, and they've got a much better they're tech natives, AI natives. But actually, the curiosity is not age dependent. And I think one of the defining features of the workforce now and in the future will be that it's multi-generational, and adapting to that and the different needs of different age groups, I think, is one of the key skills for managers, leaders, and those of us who are team members.
Adaptability.
Indeed. I mean, obviously, AI is coming down the path, but actually, even since I updated the book, the issues around AI have become quite clear in that a lot of money is going into AI in all sorts of companies. And it's in the tech companies' interests for companies to buy these systems. But actually the training, the upskilling, the use cases don't match the amount of money that's going in. So there's this fundamental mismatch in the workplace at the moment that is a moment of extreme uncertainty. And I think the best that any of us can do here is, use AI, see what it's useful for in our roles, but actually carry on with the very human sides of work too, because we don't know how it's going to play out with AI.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote recently, I think it came up this week, the piece on the job apocalypse.
Job apocalypse.
Yeah. So what does that mean from your perspective? And are we seeing already the impact of AI on kind of the lower levels of the career ladder?
Yeah, for sure. So our FT video on the graduate job apocalypse came out start of October. It has, as we're recording this, had nearly 600,000 views on YouTube, and it's doing incredibly well. Why? because it's a topic that everybody is interested in. Yes, it depends who you talk to, but the graduate job market is very bad at the moment. It's probably not the worst it's ever been. That was it probably in the early 1980s. So I've talked to someone who's got all the data on this. So we have to be, keep it in perspective. It's not the worst it's ever been. And it was worse in the early 90s when I first started work, and it was worse after the financial crisis. But what is making this particularly bad is the impact of AI in the recruitment cycle. So candidates are using AI, and it is overwhelming recruiters. So most jobs probably have 10 times more applicants than they would have done. And not all of those applicants are great applicants. It's very easy to apply for jobs, but it is very hard for recruiters to sift through and find the right people. So that's the fundamental mismatch we're facing. And on top of that, we have the economic uncertainty, geopolitical instability, and we have employers really not knowing how much AI is going to take over that kind of entry-level work. And so it's a kind of perfect storm of factors that are making it incredibly hard in the job market at the moment for graduates.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, actually, about the job market, how it's affecting the job market, but also about recruitment. Do you think that sort of the issue with graduate unemployment is symptomatic of a bigger problem, which is companies are telling their people, their departments, that they need to increase their AI spend because they want to actually reduce staff. They don't want to hire people anymore. And so that's being seen through the unemployment rising, especially amongst the most junior. So whatever roles we basically can get rid of, we're starting with those. And then the other side of the coin is also around the recruitment aspect, which you mentioned. Everybody is obviously applying for jobs. So HR departments, especially talent departments, are just flooded with hundreds of thousands of applications. And so they have to sift through those. But it's also, I think it's a piece that you actually wrote in the FT about how we might be returning to biased recruitment, because the default then is I want to recruit people that I know because I just have too much going on. So there's two things that I'm seeing here, and I don't know what you think about that. But one is obviously the bigger problem of companies just wanting to lay off people and potentially just becoming more profitable. And then the other side to it is, well, we'll just go back to what we used to do before. And then that will have an effect or an impact on diversity and fairness in jobs.
Yeah, sure. So two things. So first one, are they trying to cut costs? Yes. Not all companies. Some companies are very keen on maintaining the pipeline.
Yeah.
They're looking ahead. If you don't recruit now at the bottom, you're going to have a diamond-shaped workforce. Essentially, where are you going to get those middle managers from if nobody's training them? So that's happening. But we really don't know what the long-term impacts of AI are. So smart employers are still recruiting. They're still looking for the best candidates. So the fairness point, I guess humans are hardwired to opt for people like ourselves. Homophily, it's called. I think a lot of the recruitment and DEI practices we've had in the last 15, 20 years have helped to build more diverse workforces. If you are interested in having a workforce that reflects your customer base or your community base, you will continue to do that. Mm-hmm. However, if you are faced with 1,000 applicants for one job, I think in all probability, you might pick the person who was the great intern last summer, or the child of the person you went to university with. I'm sorry, that's, I've heard this is happening. I haven't seen research on it, but anecdotally, that is what is happening. That is not AI itself. It's a problem with the AI in the recruitment on both sides. So maybe this is a transitional thing and we will fix the use of AI. But I was just speaking to a careers advisor yesterday who told me that recruiters are going back to big in-person events because that way they can set eyes on people and they can get an idea of who these candidates are and perhaps make shortlists. Yeah. So that's a trend that I'm expecting to see.
So back actually to your initial point about future-proofing your career and how you need to really, the value of humans is still around human skills. So being able to be curious, etc. So is it a case also of you need to differentiate yourself with your ability to network, your ability to raise your profile in order for you to future-proof your career and maintain those connections with humans if you want to be seen as the right candidate for a job, rather than your brilliant ChatGPT kind of filled CV?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I think if you haven't got an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, I don't know really what you're doing, because that's the first place employers are going to look. I'm astonished by how. In fact, I saw a careers advisor on LinkedIn the other day who had not even a photo, and I thought, why are you? I mean, that's just not okay. So, yeah, sort your LinkedIn profile out. If you're a shy or introverted person, there are other ways to network. Maybe LinkedIn is the way. Maybe small in-person events, maybe one-to-ones. And also, every scrap of your work experience counts. So when we talk about entry-level jobs now, in fact, someone made this point on the video, Job Apocalypse video, when we talk about entry-level now, we mean 1 to 2 years experience. Mm. And in fact, I saw someone in comments on my video saying that she and her company are literally just setting up a new work experience program just to help people get something on their CV. Yeah. Not even proper internships, just come in, see what we do, work with us, and get a feel for corporate life. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that, because we may get to a point where you can't get an entry-level job without having done pre-entry-level work. So the internship piece becomes actually much more important. In fact, beyond, I know in financial services and consulting, internships are huge. And we're also going to be seeing a lot more people going back to do business education, which I'm sure you know. The MBA is counter-cyclical. So a lot more people are going for, business qualification, which is great, but only useful if you maximize that to build your new networks.
Yeah. And Isabel, I think there's also, companies are facing this challenge of bringing people, right, into the lower levels, as you mentioned, the internships, the graduate jobs. But then once they're in, there's also a challenge there's also a challenge related to how do you keep them engaged? How do you match their expectations, or even manage their expectations, right? The whole Gen Z, and I think we're seeing a lot on TikTok now, a lot of different trends and people really going out of their way to talk about life in the job, So how do you see this, and what are people telling you about managing the expectations from Gen Z and working together with them and ensuring that you're delivering a fulfilling experience to them, whilst also meeting the needs of the organization? So have you seen anything interesting recently about this?
I think it's the ongoing challenges that when you have got your staff, how do you nurture them, develop them? And there is this mismatch of expectation if you've got older managers who are have a different idea of career path, which is essentially, you will move up at the pace you move up. Whereas, as you say, social media has created an expectation for many people that, you will be mentored, you will have career development, you will have training, which are all good things. And I think smart employers are thinking about that a lot. How do we keep people engaged? I think there's some shocking figure like 1 in 10 employees in the UK is properly engaged from Gallup. So how do we keep people engaged? I think some people are in their 20s realise they've made the wrong career choice. So if you're lucky enough to get a job, it's quite hard to leave now, even if you are feeling it's not the right one for you. So they may be disengaged because they're in the wrong career. So think about those people going at some point, but how do you bring on the people who are really there for a corporate career? I'm sure managers and leaders can identify those people and really work with them, but it does require investment. It doesn't happen by accident, and it requires a kind of culture shift for a lot of organizations, I think, because if you're run by boomers and Gen X people, I'm Gen X, I was brought up in the workplace to just, do what I was told. I think the shift came with millennials who expect their managers to do a lot more for them. And that shift has continued for Gen Z and it will continue for Gen Alpha. So it's a bigger burden on managers, but I think it's one that employers can manage as long as they're aware of it. And maybe you outsource the coaching part to a coach. And sometimes that coach can be an AI coach. So that's coming into some big companies now. And they can be really helpful. I don't think it will replace the kind of top level executive coaching, but for younger staff or a mass of staff, some sort of AI-based coaching support backed up with humans where needed is incredibly helpful.
It's quite interesting to see the rise in expectations about touching upon training, how that's affected the way people want to learn now, especially in younger generation. I was speaking to a client last week. They're a big tech company. They've got thousands of people, and the average age of their employees is around 27.
Right.
And what they've seen was their employees want to now learn with ChatGPT. They want an LLM, and they want to be asking all the questions that they need to ask to them. They don't want to be in a classroom anymore. They don't want to have somebody telling them what they need to do. And that's massively impacted the way they see learning and training. So one of the things they've identified is, amongst the newer generation, is the lack of how they feel less and less comfortable basically showing to their peers the learning gaps. They also want to be asking as and when they want about the things that they need to learn. And so the company is obviously embracing that. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you see that happening more with companies that you talk to? Are business leaders starting to also look at the way they're going to, you talked about coaching and having an AI coach perhaps. Do you see that happening across the board in the companies that you talk to at the moment?
So to reframe that, what kind of training are people asking for? So are they asking for for LLM-based training? I don't know if they're asking for it. They're doing it. So I'm using ChatGPT for all sorts of things. Like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I look for sources for this? So it's embedded in all sorts of areas. And I think if you're coming up and you've been using it at university, you will expect to use it for training. But I don't think there's anything to replace in-person training, especially for early career. And I think that is still going to be a big bonus. So we've seen people like Deloitte invest in big university campuses for their staff. So in-person training has come back with a huge, boost after the pandemic. And I don't think that's going away. So it's a combination of things. It's the day-to-day support from an LLM, and it's the lure of something quite, perhaps a trip abroad or perhaps an offsite is incredibly helpful. There are, of course, massive companies that are going in to do huge amounts of upskilling in companies like Multiverse, for example, the Ewan Blair company.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of contracts. They're working with a lot of people. And these kind of, mass upskilling programs, I think, are only going to get bigger.
Yeah. And I guess also this disconnect between generations as well. Could that be due to bigger issues related to the leadership role models that we're seeing today, trust, and credibility of organizations? Because we're seeing many organizations maybe changing, for example, very quickly their ESG or D&I claims, simply because perhaps of change of the political scenario. We're seeing companies recently, of course, doing huge layoffs, despite saying, our people are the best. Of course, these are business realities, and we cannot expect that businesses are going to be there for you and all the time. But are we seeing, perhaps the younger generations, are they seeing this as almost a way to say, what is the purpose of work? Are they starting to question this, the whole idea of working in itself? Do you have any thoughts on that, on the impact of leadership and changes and so on?
So what's the point of a corporate job, and how does one lead a company? The point of a corporate job, I think, that's changing, especially for younger generations. And I think the purpose thing, so 5 years ago, we were hearing all the time about people wanting purpose in work. And I don't think that's changed, but I think people are perhaps more hard-headed about it now. So maybe the idea of the activist employee has quietened down, partly because of the political climate in the United States, but also I think the generation coming through, it's very difficult to get a job. It's difficult to hold on to a job. So I think there's more pragmatism than passion now. So what is it that you have to do as a leader? Yeah, you have to, do as you say. So I think that, the hypocrisy piece is still very big for Gen Z. So if you've got leaders spouting all sorts of exciting mission statements and commitments that actually are matched by a toxic work environment, that's going to come out in one way or another. People will leave, they'll vote with their feet, even if they've got no other job to go to. They will go off on stress leave, which is, the mental health thing is huge and getting bigger. And they will perhaps go on social media and shout about it. So all of these things make it important for leaders to do as they say. So act in the way that they say they're going to act. And I think that's never been more important. And maybe that's the central leadership conundrum now. Fine words used to be fine because people just sort of carried on doing what they're doing. But I think now people can see through it. And I think this trend for leaders to be much more visible on video, for example, on LinkedIn, to communicate much more directly. If we say vulnerable, I think that's not quite the right word. I don't think you need to be vulnerable as a leader. I do think you need to be honest up to a point. Let's not, bringing your whole self to work is not a thing anymore. And I think that's a good thing. And actually, we do want to look up to leaders. That is a human trait. They have to be. What is the definition of leadership? It is someone who inspires us and who we want to follow. Way too many leaders are not doing that. And actually, that's 101. So be someone who's inspiring and people want to follow. Set a clear path. A very distinguished coach said to me, there is absolutely no point in being a CEO or a leader and having a strategy for the future of your company if that strategy is not being executed by every single manager in your company. So really, as ever, leadership can say all the fine words, but the real action on the ground has to come from the middle management there. And too often, that's forgotten.
Yeah.
That's the future of corporate culture and business, I think.
Yeah.
Investing more in managers.
Investing more in managers. And I think this is, of course, this is a trend that we see with some of our clients. But as you said, that sometimes gets forgotten, right? Because the middle manager is often seen as the person who is on the way of everything. But there's perhaps lack of investment in that kind of population of the organization. But Aisha and I yesterday, we had a very interesting conversation, and you're talking about the return of the non.
Yeah. So actually, that's a good point, because everything that you just said is so relevant. And I listened to your last podcast, your last episode of Working It, because I just wanted to just put things in perspective again, because so much has changed. In that episode, you were talking to Andrew Hill about the return of the authoritarian leader. And a lot has happened since, so we can clearly see that this is a new trend. I feel like there is a huge disconnect between, as you said, what the leaders are doing and this command and control sort of knee-jerk reaction that we're seeing, and how that's almost exacerbated actually by the disruption of AI. What are your thoughts on this? Should we be worried
about authoritarian leadership? Yeah, I think it is making a comeback in politics. Is that matched by business? Not so much yet. That's interesting. But I think the idea of a politicized workplace is possibly not going to be as big a thing in future. So one of the key things we're going to have to learn to do is work with people who disagree with us in a very overt way. So political disagreement used to be something that we didn't really know about because of social media, because of the way that the echo chambers operate now. We may know that we work with people with whom we vehemently disagree. And I think it is vital for leaders to be able to bridge those divides. And having an authoritarian leader suggests that you're pushing it in one direction. So there may be people who specifically go to work for example, Elon Musk. You know what you're letting yourself in for. He is very explicit about how he runs his companies. And in fact, the FT ran an article this week talking to a lot of people who'd left and why they'd left. And those reasons were not surprising, but it's interesting. I think the disconnect comes when you go into a corporate environment and something changes. So the leadership really changes. And maybe that will follow a political change. So at the moment in the UK and Europe, I think business is in a different place from politics. In 5 years' time, will we be having this conversation? I don't know, because the laws may be tight depending on who gets.
Yeah.
For example, if we have a reform government here, if there is a Marine Le Pen government in France, I think the laws on business may change, and that may fundamentally change our corporate environment, and we will be having a very different conversation. But the issue for leaders does not change, which is to take care of the people who work for them, to be brutal, to get maximum productivity and efficiency from those people. And you don't get that from bad leadership, from setting up divisions between people, from toxic work culture.
Yeah. But as they're saying that, I mean, for those that are saying that, they're also still laying off people. We've seen major job cuts. Just recently, I think Accenture announced that they were laying off about 11,000 of their employees because they can't be reskilled for AI, which is an interesting point that they're making. How do they assess who can, who cannot be reskilled for AI? And so I can understand that the politics are not yet invading the workplace, but at the same time, it's hard to believe what the leaders are saying. And when they are telling the managers, trust in us, we will be fine, it looks otherwise. And everyone seems to be a little bit worried about their jobs right now. And managers especially are the most squeezed layer in business, as we can see. They're asked to do everything and anything. And they're often the reason why people go. So this sort of toxic cycle that we seem to be going through right now, I don't know if there is an end to it.
No. I mean, the AI thing is uncertain. And I think a lot of leaders are watching and waiting to see what happens. We've seen huge layoffs in tech, but then as someone who looks at the stats was telling me yesterday, they overhired at some points in the cycle post-COVID. There was a boom. So some of it is a rebalancing. But I do think you're right. There are going to be, for example, in consultancy, AI can do some of that work, the reports type stuff that was entry level or different kinds of work. I mean, on the optimistic narrative, we may have different kinds of jobs. So in law firms, for example, you may have a lot more people who have technical knowledge, fewer lawyers and more people with tech knowledge who can apply the AI effectively in a legal capacity.
Yep.
The lawyers will still be needed and they'll be fantastic lawyers, but maybe we lose the bottom 10% in pretty much every profession. And let's be honest, to be brutal, there is often what we might call dead wood in a lot of legacy organizations. And perhaps AI is a way of spring cleaning that, or that's perhaps how leaders are seeing it at this moment.
So what do we do with the people that we can't fit into jobs anymore?
Well, some of those jobs are going to go. And I think there will be different jobs, but and reskilling. I mean, if we look at what happened when there was the great deindustrialization in the UK in the 1980s, steelworks, coal mines, there was very little provision put in to help reskill those people. We're now seeing the political ramifications of that 30, 40 years later. The key thing is for governments and employers and other interested parties to put in place an enormous reskilling, retraining support program. Yep. Is that going to happen? You tell me.
Yeah.
Governments are very strapped for cash, but it's a huge thing. And what are the areas that still need a lot of face-to-face staff? Healthcare is still going to suck up an enormous amount of people. There are not enough. What was this statistic someone told me recently? There are not enough Gen Z people ready for work in the workplace, even to fill all the NHS positions in this country. If we're only recruiting internally. That's how big an employer the NHS is in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And if we take into account all the young people who are off sick or with stress, we have a huge problem. We actually need more people in the workforce for different jobs.
But there doesn't seem to be a real strategy about that.
I think the British government has got a big review that Charlie Mayfield, who used to be chairman of John Lewis, is running about getting people back to work to try and tackle the long-term sick problem, but specifically with reference to this younger cohort, 18 to 25, which are the fastest rising off work sick. So we've got two problems. We've got people being let go, and we've got a younger cohort that isn't engaging in the workforce. And if you don't start to engage in your late teens and early 20s, the likelihood is that you never really work.
Yeah.
And that's a really terrifying prospect. And I choose to be if I say optimistic, that's not quite right, but I think the fundamental reshaping of corporate life and society is only just at the start, and we don't know what opportunities there are going to be.
I mean, Tiago, I have one more big question actually on this, because we talked about that the other day, which is, can't we just reimagine work? If we're saying that we've created AI for the betterment of humankind, why do we need to work? That's such a capitalist view on creating value as a society. If there are no jobs if some jobs will disappear, can't we repurpose humans to do the human stuff? For instance, caring for elderly, having more time to spend with our families, doing the things that make us human, rather than having to work. I mean, I would love for AI to take my job, work for me, so that I actually can focus on my own life. I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's among people who know a lot about tech, that's a very common phrase. Let the humans do the stuff that humans are good at, and let the machines do the stuff that machines are good at. Where is the capitalist piece in this? Who's going to pay us? Unless we're having UBI, universal basic income, which is something that I think will probably be talked about a lot more in 5 or 10 years' time. We're still part of a capitalist system.
Mm.
So the remaking of work may mean that we're all doing jobs that are paid much less.
Mm-hmm.
And that is another potential outcome, because you can have the staff, but you can say you could work 3 or 4 days a week, or I'm only paying you 40% less than you were being paid before because the tasks you're doing are not the same.
Yeah.
So all of these outcomes are very possible, but I don't think anyone's going to be saying to us, hey, you go and spend 3 days a week caring and I'll just pay you the same amount of money.
Or maybe things could cost less. That would be nice.
Well, maybe the whole economy will be rebalanced. I don't think so, actually. If you look at every technological advance we've had, we're not working a 15-hour week like Keynes said we would be. It's just enabled us to do more work. And I think the danger with AI is the same. So thoughtful employers are saying things like, using AI for your day-to-day stuff will free you up to have more client meetings, to have more team meetings, to work more effectively and smoothly. I would love to think that's going to happen, and I think it may happen in the client-facing jobs. You'll have fewer people, but they will be excellent at human skills. They will be excellent at client handling. So those people are going to thrive.
But in reality, I think what a lot of people are feeling is that they're just busier, just doing a lot more. They have a lot more tasks because perhaps they can do faster, the tasks. So they're taking on a lot more, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, I don't know, but people are just busier. Isabel, I wanted to go back a little bit to the point about reskilling, right? Because, this is a very important conversation, but in the real world, I don't think we can expect that employers are simply just going to reskill everybody, everybody that they want to lay off, right? So realistically, yes, some employers might be ahead and might be looking at that, but it's a very hard expectation. And I think it's, in the short term as well, at least I don't see that happening. And I think it goes back to your book, right? I think people need to take ownership a little bit of their, about their career, right? If we are seeing all the signs that, the world, the reality of work is really changing, and the skills that are needed are changing. We all need to be aware of that. And what advice would you give to individuals who are feeling a little bit threatened, as Aisha was saying, and where do we go from here, in terms of someone who has a job in an office and feeling, okay, something's happening here, I'm not feeling so comfortable, and I need to do something about it. So what would be the first step for someone to start looking at their career in a more holistic way and future-proof way?
So I think, it's taking that step back and thinking, well, where am I at? What's happening? It's sometimes when there's stuff rumbling at work and you're not really aware of it. But what you can do is maybe take charge of some learning for yourself. So we can all learn. You can devote half an hour or an hour a day to either an online skills course or perhaps reading something relevant. This stuff never goes out of fashion. preparing yourself for what is coming around the corner. How can you learn? So I spend a huge amount of time in Substack. I think I subscribe to about 500 Substacks. I don't read all of them. I skim them, but I've got some I paid for. But that, to me, is the best place to find where the new trends are coming from. So if you are someone who's looking for the new trends, how can you think what's around the corner? How can I be the person who's going to sit into this new world? It may not profit you. If you're in a big corporate with a very fixed structure, there may be nothing you can do. But if you look like you're someone who's taking initiative, who's learning, that's always going to benefit you. And also ultimately life is not in our control, is it? And, I often like to cite my favourite book, 4,000 Weeks, the Oliver Burkeman book, which is, I think, the best book about productivity and time management, because basically we're all going to die. What is it that we want to do with that life? And the to-do list is never going to end. So actually, maybe you shift some of your priorities away from the busy work and towards something that is about you, not your employer. And maybe that's not something employers want to hear, so you don't have to shout about it. But I do think you have to protect something of yourself. And I think for too long, the corporate career, certainly from the middle of the 20th century, has been this kind of paternalistic, we're going to take care of you. And maybe they do still take care of us. My goodness, I've made enormous use of the FT health insurance for my family over the years. What an amazing perk. But in terms of our career, we have to think a lot more about doing more for ourselves. And I don't think that shift has really filtered through.
Absolutely. And for the willing employers who are perhaps, those better meaning employers who are really looking to ensure that their teams are upskilled, or ensuring that they are they have this culture at least of learning within the organization. What advice or kind of what good examples can you mention here to for those who are interested in actually, okay, I want you to do something about it. I'm in charge of people. I'm in charge of talent in my organization. Of course, there will be changes along the way. Things will change. But I want you to do something about it. I want to ensure that the workforce is upskilled. Is there any kind of advice when it comes to creating this mindset, this culture that you've seen good organizations doing?
Now you're going to get me. I have. Let's think. Not really. I mean, I do go to quite a lot of dinners where people talk about what they're doing, but it's always off the record and it's always quite negative. So let me say something like this. If you're an employer that is offering a really rich learning and development program, for example, freely available online courses or virtual courses or courses people can opt into, a lot of the problem is that people are not aware. There's a very low opt-in rate in corporates for L&D. Why? Is it awareness? Is it lack of time? And at some point, you have to nudge. Maybe there may have to be a nudging. So, for example, with AI skills, I think the research shows that little and often is the best thing. So you've got, I think, when Slack implemented AI in its own workforce, it was 15 minutes a day, and everybody had to do it. You had to tick off, and it's a little bit like being at school, but something goes in. So I do believe in the nudge, because not everyone's going to be proactive. And then if the people who don't respond to the nudge present themselves, you will be able to see that's an indicator. The other thing that I think is useful is sharing knowledge. So, if I read something interesting or useful, I often post it on LinkedIn and I find other people's insights interesting there. A blog, a Substack, an HBR article. These small ways that are introducing us to new ideas. Obviously the FT. This is what I'm trying to do with my newsletter. It's about saying to people, here's something interesting. This might be round the corner. And how can I, if you've got a team, could you have a session where you all share something that you've read this week or learnt from, or a video you've watched? These small micro-learning moments, I think, are going to become a lot bigger in the future, because the AI is going to be doing our admin for us.
Exactly. And I kind of agree with you on that, because, when we work with organizations, they say we've got all of these fancy management programs and sometimes the adoption is not great and what are we doing wrong? And then they go through so many changes. And let's be honest, there is change fatigue. People are just tired. Here's a program, here's another program, here's another program. Let's reshuffle the entire organization and do it all over again. What we also see is that there is a lack of framing for the learning, because they are selling it as, okay, here is a bunch of, or like this really nice menu of programs that you can do, or learning that you can do, off you go. But it doesn't have a context to it. And it's not very clear what they benefit from. I see, just like, for instance, for managers in particular, who are battling so many things in the day-to-day. They have to manage the teams, they have to execute, and so on. Carving the time out for learning is not something that they always have the time to do or can afford to do. And so it's like, I'll do that later. It's not necessary right now. It's not a priority for me. And what I see L&D really struggling is this sort of framing piece. You need to create the right narrative for your learning, and it needs to be clear what people are taking away and what the benefits are to them individually as learners, but also to the organization. Because if you don't actually take the time to learn along the way, and we can talk about the formats and, the ways in which they can learn, it's not just going to impact you personally, it will impact you professionally, but it will also have an impact on the organization. So that's kind of one of the things that I see quite a lot. I had one more question actually for you. This is more around your audience on LinkedIn. I see that you're so engaging with people. What do you say is the most common question you're getting lately around work and corporate culture?
Do you mean in terms of what people are approaching me about?
Yeah.
On LinkedIn and in my inbox?
Yeah.
It's probably AI rollout in workplaces. But then that's a lot of PR people who are engaged in it. I think from the human side of it, I mean, it's always this, I get a lot of people who are coaches, who are saying, I'm doing this program or that program, but it's interesting, but it's not, I need to see it, I'm much more interested in the bigger picture stuff, really. And I think there is a lot of uncertainty, you're right, around what is the point of what are we training for? And unless leaders make that use case for example, AI, and sometimes they don't know themselves yet, because that's the bigger picture we're in at the moment. I mean, it's a giant experiment, and we're all in it, essentially. So searching for answers is, on a macro level, impossible. On a micro level inside corporations, I'm sure it's possible, because there will be individual use cases at a team level even, that you can source between you. And that's, I guess, a learning thing, where it's a kind of listening thing from leaders saying, what is it that you need help with? What have you found? And actually, if you have a kind of amnesty for staff, because there's this massive problem with staff bringing their own AI to work and not fessing up.
Yep.
If you offer some sort of amnesty and saying, what are you doing? And by that use case, you can replicate it across organizations. I wonder how much of that is going on. I'd be interested too.
Two more questions before we wrap up. First, this year we've seen a lot politically, crazy stories about CEOs being caught on the camera at Coldplay gigs and all of that. What was the most interesting story that you covered this year, or the most popular one? And what does it tell about 2025?
Mm-hmm. So, I guess the biggest things I've done this year are I'm making a second working video series. So we've only had 2 videos out yet. The first one was about agentic AI. Yeah. Hugely popular, hundreds of thousands of views. So not only, I think the AI conversation is moving so quickly, people are hungry for information that helps them to keep up. And I think agents are the next thing in that conversation. So that was hugely popular. But even more popular is this graduate job crisis. That's hugely popular. Anything about productivity is always very popular. I think I always go back to the thing that we don't talk about enough, which is that nobody has ever defined what productivity is for a knowledge worker. We don't make widgets. We don't till the fields. We don't harvest potatoes. We sit on our laptops. What is our productivity metric? It's essentially how long is a piece of string, isn't it? And that is the central conundrum of life as a professional or a laptop worker. And AI may help us solve that. But unless leaders are putting in boundaries around people's workloads, I think we're going to see huge rates of burnout coming down the pipe, in addition to this mental health crisis we've already got.
Mm-hmm. And just going back, I mean, you just mentioned the agentic AI. Are we likely to see bosses being our next, an agent be our next boss? Are we likely to see that?
It's possible. I think we're definitely likely to see agents who are in our team. So the makeup of teams may become much more flexible. We may have agents who are colleagues. I think bosses, and I think this is already happening for a few people, they have so-called avatars, but will be agents. Lots of bosses or the people who help them are making agents that can do certain functions for leaders, because the pressure on leaders is so great they can't be everywhere at once. So I think the promise of agents in leadership is huge, actually, but it has to be managed. So I think you're still going to need to have your executive team or your chief of staff to help you manage with the agents.
Actually, on that, sorry, do you think we'll see the rise of AI agents in the boardroom?
Yes, I do. I think an AI agent might be really helpful to parse the board papers and to work with the board. Will it be a board member in itself? I wouldn't say, never say never.
No.
And just to finalize, if you were looking back at 2025, let's say at December 2025, imagine if you were to write an article, a recap article of this year, what would be the headline?
Oh, I'd say squishy and uncertain.
Why?
Well, that probably wouldn't be the headline because there's no verb. I would say look back at a roller coaster year, but I think 2026 will be the same.
More or less?
More. Because AI rollout the impact of AI, I think, will become much more apparent next year.
Brace ourselves for them.
Yeah. On that note, thanks very much, Isabel. It's been great talking to you. We're just on time. How can people get in touch with you? What is the best way to connect?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn often, and please subscribe to my newsletter if you're an FT reader. It's you sign up at ft.com/newsletters.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for our excellent co-host, Aisha.
Thank you, Aisha.
No, thank you.
John, thank you. And I've been Thiago Kivi, and this is Learning Rewired. I'll see you next time.